We'll get started, everyone. Thank you for coming. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the land that we meet on tonight is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with the country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Roll call. We have an apology from Councillor White. And everyone else is here. Are there any motions to grant leave of absence, councillors? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, for Councillor Davies for December 1st to the 31st of December, all inclusive.
Sorry, can you say those dates again?
The 1st to the 31st of December.
12th to the 31st, inclusive?
The 1st to the 31st, inclusive? Yep.
Okay. So that's moved by Deputy Mayor Shanks. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Vallelonga. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Are you just going to put Deputy Mayor Shanks there, Chris? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you. So there's no non-attendance. So we'll move on to deputations. We have Mr. Ian Tooley, budget and rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly hope everyone's feeling safe tonight. The cause of this massive 7% rate rise cannot be blamed on inflation or CPI, in my view. The cause of this massive 7% rate rise is a Gawler Council that refuses to curb its spending, refuses to cut waste, refuses to live within its means, and refuses to stop expanding its workforce, and that refuses to focus on its core business. The budget process is wrong. And what you've just experienced, members, in the last 3 months of budget meetings is why I stopped voting for the budget way back. It was pointless and I never had the numbers to do anything about it. The administration establishes the budget and then you spend months and months arguing over a mere fraction, arguing amongst yourselves whose tiny bid will go above the line or below the line, whether someone should have $5,000 cut off that bid or not, and arguing about tiny cuts here and there. All the while, you thought that your budget work might make a difference for keeping the rates low. Turns out that all your months of budget meetings are pointless. I worked that out a long time ago. You only achieve minor cosmetic changes, and any savings that you do achieve have zero effect on the rates. The administration uses any savings that you make to reduce debt. You worked your butt off at the last meeting, and I thought that was rather impressive. You got 1.2 million down. I heard Ethan White speak emotionally about how we need to cut the rates and get this rates down. And you actually thought you were doing that. But it turns out that that 1.2 million didn't come off the rates, didn't come off the rate increase, it came off debt. By your own figures, 1.2 million could have taken 5% off the rates. The so-called Growth Council, we seem to be going further and further into debt. All the gains from being a Growth Council seem to be consumed in ballooning staff numbers. 4 new staff members seem to be added each year. And to actually pay for 4 staff members, you need to have 200 new houses come online at $2,000 average rate. And we're not getting a growth of 200 a year, but we're getting the growth in staff numbers. I estimate that since 2013, there's been 40 new staff added. When times are tough, we make cuts and we go without. In a household, we put off replacing the fridge, we put off the holiday, we put off replacing the daggy old lounge. We focus on the essentials like food, school and medicine. Council could do the same. You can cut rates and you can maintain essential services by cutting all the non-essentials from your budget. Let me give an example. At the last meeting, there was a move to cut some of the Williston Cemetery spend, and there was a move to cut $20,000 for a Christmas parade. Councillor Hennessy voted to cut that $20,000, even though Isaac Solomon had said, if we don't need it, we won't spend it. Councillor Hennessy, who sits as the chair of the Friends of the Williston Cemetery, then voted and stayed in the meeting to vote in favour of not cutting anything from the Williston Cemetery spend. And yet Councillor Hughes left the meeting because it was just a very faint connection with something that he declared a conflict in. A few weeks before, Councillor Kosh left the meeting when there was a debate about naming a road Kosh. He left the meeting. Councillor Hennessy stayed in the meeting and voted. She declared a conflict, but stayed and voted. Cut the Christmas parade and voted to support the spend. $260,000 in this budget on the Williston Cemetery. Now, I'm not saying that they're not worthy. They've been decades in the making, but it's an example of when you've got tough times, cut the non-essential. Can they wait 1 or 2 more years? Of course they can. If you cut $260,000 from that Williston Cemetery and say, we'll put that on hold until we've got more financial times, you'd save another 1%. We're now at 6%. So members, what do you do? This is what I suggest you do. I suggest that you send this budget tonight back to the administration and you say you're not going to
30
accept
seconds.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. You're not going to accept it until it comes back to you with 0 or maximum 2% rate increase. You cut the fat out of that. You keep the essential services like rubbish, roads, curbing. That's what I would do tonight. And can I finish with this? I want you to look through the lens, not of how this might impact a really well-paid executive on this council of 200,000 or 300,000. I'd like you tonight to look at this
Thank
through.
you, Mr. Tooley. That's 5
Mayor,
minutes.
would you please give me 30 more seconds?
No. 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Natalie Johnson, who is the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. Do you want to make any comments at this stage, Natalie?
Thank you, Mayor Redman. Thanks for having me. I would just like to say, and as you are aware, the Audit and Risk Committee have reviewed the budget. We spent 2 meetings reviewing the budget, analysing the costs. We went back to management and we said, look, I think you can do better. Management came back and found an additional $300,000 in savings that was applied to that budget. Then we have to think about the future of a growth council and the required rate increase that is required to achieve our strategic objectives, and to make sure that we can continue on and trade, work towards a long-term surplus. As we've seen, history has shown that if you don't adequately increase the rates each year, then once you fall behind, it's very hard to catch up again. So you may be able to do, like, just say you decided to do a 2% increase in rates this year, and we keep on with the hyperinflation. What happens if you have to increase them 10% next year in order to keep a long-term surplus? So this isn't a number that has been picked out of the air by management. It has been heavily scrutinised by the Audit and Risk Committee. We've sent it back. It's been thought about. It's been revised. And the 7% is what we've come up with for the long-term sustainability of the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon Perkins, do you want to say anything?
Through you, Mayor. So I think I just probably will support the comments from Natalie as to sit there and say that while I understand that 7% rate revenue increase, and this is what we actually need to understand, that it's actually a rate revenue increase. It's actually not a rate increase. And from that perspective is basically what is actually required for this council to ensure that is actually creating, at least covering its costs to actually deliver its core services. Anything less than that, effectively, we are going backwards, and effectively what you're actually doing is not just borrowing for the new projects in operating initiatives and capital projects, but you're actually operating borrowings or using debt to actually fund the operations, the core operations of the business. And that is not a sign of sustainable council. I understand that, you know, realistically it's to sit there and say, okay, well, you know, if we can reduce it by 1%, that will actually be better. But realistically, you need to actually understand that effectively what that relates back to the individual ratepayer. And I'm not taking away from the fact that times are tough. There's cost increases everywhere. But realistically, based on current valuations for the average residential ratepayer, we're talking about between $5 and $7 a difference for a 1% reduction. So it's not over a year, it's not a lot of money, but effectively for us as a council, the cumulative effect of us losing that 1% is actually massive. It's, you know, it's talking about whether we actually have the ability to deliver some of the, I suppose, the capital and community improvements and infrastructure. And I'm not talking about flash things. I'm talking about the fact that people are always, I'm talking about the fact that they don't have a footpath down their side of the street, you know, and they're wanting a footpath. So it's some of those basic increases and improvements in the community infrastructure that effectively will have to be foregone if the council doesn't actually make those decisions of making sure that we're generating enough cash in the business to actually do that and to actually reinvest and make the council a financial sustainable position, you know. And the other thing is to sit there and say, okay, well, we've got a SCOSA, which is the independent assessment on our operations, which is actually going to come in through from a 24-25 financial year. They will look at our past performance. They will look at what we actually have about our delivery of our long-term financial plans and all the plans that we've adopted. And they will make comment to sit there and say, effectively, you're not delivering to the community of what you're actually saying. And that is actually a reflection of the fact that we're actually not generating, we're not in a surplus position. And that's what from a financial management perspective and prudent and responsible financial management position, that's where this council should actually be endeavouring to actually achieve. The audit committee gave the, I suppose, the challenge to the administration to actually return us to that financial position of an operating surplus position within 3 years. You know, as an administration, we've taken on that challenge, and we sit there and say, okay, well, we know it's not going to be easy. I probably would dispute some of the comments that were made in tonight's deputation about the statement of facts that were actually presented with regard to the number of staff that have been appointed, the extent of the fact that we're taking this $1.2 million savings that apparently has been saved, and I'm not quite sure whether that's actually coming from to pay down debt. It's the fact that we're not paying down debt. It's just the fact that our overdraft facility to actually fund these operations, fund council operations and deliver the council services that the community wants and needs and desires is actually being reduced. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I will sit there and put it to you as to sit there and say, okay, well, what would you do with your household budget if you're actually running an overdraft on your credit card and you actually had you knew that you actually had to get some income to actually pay down that debt because you couldn't sustain that debt. That's exactly the same thing that is being proposed in this budget, is to sit there and say some things are going to has to change. And unfortunately, due to the nature of our business or the nature of our operations, is that our main source of income is rate revenue. And we don't have that much opportunity to actually increase our other non-rate revenue, because effectively the charges or the fees and charges that we actually charge for those actually contribute to the cost of delivering those services. And some of them are mandatory, some of them are that we actually do as a result of community needs and expectations. So I know it's hard. I know it's probably a big rate revenue increase compared to previous years. Unfortunately, we haven't had the increase in the new development this year to actually offset that impact to the wider community. Over the last couple of years, we've had high growth, so the impact of the rate revenue increases that we've actually been processing or have actually been reduced to to your existing ratepayers, because we've actually got that additional revenue coming from those growth, those new developments. So yeah.
What's the average for an average ratepayer? What's the rate increase?
So based on current valuations, and obviously these valuations, the final declaration will be on the valuations for the week ending the 22nd of June, I think. But based on it currently at 7%, it's $89. So it's around about 5.1% for that
5.1?
Yeah, for the average residential ratepayer.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Kosh, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Through you, I'm looking on page 36 of 84, and the last paragraph talks about section 123 of the Local Government Act and a review of a long-term financial plan in 23, 24. Is that the SCOSA investigation or something?
Sorry, I didn't catch the
Page
page.
36 of 84.
Oh, sorry, I was up to 60. 36. Thank you.
And so
Thank you
is
for
that different to the SCOSA assessment we'll have in 24, 25?
Thank you.
Through the mayor. So yes, that is basically, that's the standard. So within 2 years of the local government election, effectively all our strategic plans and long-term financial plan has to actually go undertake a major review. And so that would be basically a reassessment of what we're actually including in from a major projects perspective. However, effectively, the SCOSA review will actually take into account historical data. So it actually does take into account our past performance from a financial perspective, our past budgets, what our ratings, what we've had in our long-term financial plan, and how those actuals have actually, I suppose, reflected our long-term financial plan going in the past. But it'll also look about what we're actually doing in the future and the linkages between our budget as our operations, between the asset management plan, the long-term financial plan, and any other corporate and our overall community plan as well. All those linkages to make sure that they are all going in the same direction, and our budgets and what we're actually charging from a rate revenue perspective to fund that is actually providing value for money for what we're actually delivering. Yeah, so it's more about value for money, not necessarily the value of the rate increase. It is, are they, for what they're getting charged, are they getting value for money in what's been delivered or what's been promised through the plans?
I'll go to Councillor Davies. He's got his hand up.
Yeah, so just because we're doing the budget and also the participatory budget stuff. When we had our little meeting about it, we were discussing the small shelter and getting the costs down on that, because I think there was a idea that we would have a more premium shelter and we needed to sort out what the situation was there. Has that been addressed? Do we have a pricing on the
So-
shelter as we're
Yeah, I asked what each one was worth. So the accessible peace garden is worth 13,600, but they've rounded it up to 20. The revegetation in Williston is worth 5,000. The shelter, we did look at reducing that 20,000. So we were looking at reducing that to a fairly basic shelter. Remember that discussion? Yeah. And the other one was, can't remember writing, I think it's 8,600 was the other one. Yeah. So I'll pass over to Sharon to just provide comment on the shelter.
So in response through you, Mayor, in response to your question about have we actually got any detailed costings? No, we haven't, because obviously the decision to actually undertake these projects haven't actually been made at this point in time. So obviously, if that from the results from the voting, that was the highest, that was the most supported project. So obviously, and has been recommended to be undertaken. So obviously, if that's the project that we'll do, we'll do it within the $20,000 budget allocation and to the extent of what's actually available from that perspective. So
I'm going to go back to the agenda and ask if anybody's got a declaration of interest. There'll be none. Okay. So any other questions from, I'll go to Councillor Lorna and then Councillor Hughes. Did you have your hand up, David? Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Can I just get a dollar figure on what the actual average, what average home rate's based on? I'll have a follow-up question for that as well, please.
Okay. So the average residential value, which just basically is our total capital value for the residential divided by the number of properties, is around about 419,000.
Do we have a breakdown of how many of those properties are actually on payment plans?
Through you, the Mayor, no, I don't have that information on how many of what property values. I'm assuming what properties are on payment plans. But I know that there has been a significant reduction in the number of people that are actually, compared to past years, that are actually on payment plans. But I'll take that on notice as to how many properties
Thank you.
are on payment plans.
Councillor Hughes, I'll go to you now.
I was going to move the motion if you went back to the report.
Yes, thank you. You'd like to speak to it?
Just quickly, when I actually first came onto council, because the council was actually running deficits in its operations budget, $3 million deficits each year, and very quickly those $3 million deficits ran into $11 million of deficit and debt that the council was running. The council, to fund that, was paying very high interest rates. So the quicker we can get out of an operating deficit environment, I think it's really important as a council and to be sustainable. But it did surprise me that for a number of years before I got on council, that was going on, and we weren't getting major projects or major redevelopments. That was just operating the council in deficit. So it wasn't a sustainable budget that was going through at all. It was actually a terrible situation. So we really need to be a sustainable council, and to get to that sustainable position, as our staff have been telling us, as quickly as possible. I really thank the staff for the detailed report. It's a huge amount of effort. I really like the analysis of all the people that have made comments. It was really detailed, and I thought that was fantastic. Those comments were really important and really good to get feedback. A lot of councils don't get very much feedback at all on their plans, and it's good to see that Gawler does, and the staff actually do respond really well to the comments as well. I thought it was great. So yeah, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Joe, I am noting that there are councils around the state, looking at 7.9%. There's some in the Riverland over 10%. They've had the floods as well, but there is some really major rate rises to try and keep their councils sustainable, and that's what this budget and this process is trying to do. So I'm happy to move this motion.
Before I ask for a seconder, I'd like to thank Mr. Tooley for his deputation, but I'd also like to thank everyone who responded and provided a submission. So Mr. Graham Tucker, Mr. Ian Tooley, Mr. Shane Bailey, and Mrs. Kath Modra. And I think they gave a variety. One more. Where's the other one? Where's the other one? Deb Heinrich, Miss Deb Heinrich, thank you. They all gave different variations, and I think they were quite useful comments. So thank you for those people that provided those submissions. So now I will ask for a seconder. Councillor Hennessy, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to second this, and I echo the words from councillor Hughes. It is time to be responsible. As somebody who was part of the process of taking things out of the budget, I'm very comfortable with where we are now. We have to balance a lot, but I'm quite comfortable with what's being presented to us.
Discussion? Yes, councillor Davies.
Yeah, well, I'd like to, well, either move an amendment or if the mover and seconder are happy with it, just adjust it. This is around the participatory budgeting. I'd like to include all 4 submissions.
That's quite a big variation.
I mean, I'm happy to make an amendment if the mover and seconder don't agree.
Yeah, but I'm not going to accept that as amendments are minor variations. So
Okay,
you're adding
well,
quite. So
I'll
if you
speak-
move an amendment, that might be better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll move an amendment.
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, so my amendment is that all 4 of the participatory budgeting submissions are approved. And I can speak to it. This is,
So is that more than 60,000?
no, this is under 60,000.
Under 60? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so to clarify, we had a budget of 60,000. These 4 projects together are still under the 40,000.
Yeah.
And so we went out to vote. The results are on page 16 of 84, if you want to take a look at them. And there was a weighted score system because people could have their first preference, their second preference, etc. And so the shelter had the biggest vote, but the other 3 were fairly equal. So the second place one that made it in had 349 weighted votes, and then the Peace Garden project had 344 weighted votes, which is a 5-vote difference. And then the drinking fountain had 328, which is about another 15-vote difference. So these are all quite similar in support. I guess the rationale that there was a high level of first preference votes for these 2 projects is, I understand it, but I think in some ways the second preferences were much higher on these other 2, which is why they're up in the weighted votes. And I think in some ways that's actually just as valuable feedback as the first preference, because the way that this system works is the first preference comes in from people who send out their email newsletters, etc., and they say, support my project, and that's good and all part of the democratic system. But those people then, without being prompted, get asked, well, what else would you like? And, the drinking fountain at Gawler South, for example, got 60 second preferences, whereas the shelter only got 20 basically. So, I think all of these have shown that they've had support, and they're under the budget that we've set for participatory budgeting. So and as for the motion as a whole, I guess this is just accepting that we've had feedback is the rest of the motion aside from the participatory budgeting. So I'm happy with that, but this is the amendment I'd like to make.
Do I have a seconder? You can't have spoken in the debate if you second an amendment. You're happy to second councillor Vallelonga? Yes, is that right? Yep, thank you. Do you wish to speak at all? No, thank you. A person who moves or seconds an amendment will in so doing be taken to have spoken to the motion to which the amendment relates. Okay, so just so you're aware. Anybody else can speak multiple times. Not the mover or the seconder. So we have a mover and a seconder. Any other discussion? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, look, I get the sentiment on this and also the participatory budget line direction, I think has been a really positive one. It's getting that good engagement, I think, and I think we're only growing towards it. I guess I don't know if I'm necessarily against the amendment. I guess I'm just a little bit caught off guard at this particular point in time in some discussion that I think is to come regarding the budget. So yeah, I almost feel if this was a motion on notice in relation to the final budget, I could have a bit more of a holistic thought bubble around it. But yeah, so I'm sort of a little bit on the fence on this one. I understand why, and I understand we're coming in under that budget allowance. So it makes sense, but we are also trying to save wherever we can. Yeah, so yeah, I'm probably going to leave it to when I vote.
Any other discussion? If not, councillor Davies, I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. The amendment is lost. Division. All those in favour of the amendment, please stand. So all those in favour are councillor Davies and councillor Vallelonga. I'll just allow the minute taker to catch up. All those against are councillor Lorna, councillor Koch, councillor Hughes, Deputy Mayor Shanks, councillor Solomon, councillor Hennessy and councillor Samble. The motion is lost. Did you get that, Chris? Okay, I'll just allow everyone. Yeah, that's right. Okay, okay, so we're back to the original motion. Any other discussion on the motion, councillor Shanks, Deputy Mayor?
I just had a question before I speak to it, Mayor. I agree with councillor Hughes in the response to the public engagement, the consultation. What are we doing to try to net more? I know I ask this every budget cycle and I know it's a difficult task, but you know, 5 out of 26,000 isn't massive either. So I'm just trying to figure out, yeah,
Well,
if there's the
I
appetite.
guess that's the people that submitted quite detailed submissions.
Oh, absolutely, and
Yeah.
respect, absolutely. But
So
you know,
I don't have an answer for you. I don't think anyone's got an answer for you, Nathan. It is what it is, and I think that there was lots of online, in the paper, etc. Engagement opportunities. So I don't have that answer because I don't think you can have an answer to that. I don't know what people are thinking, and I don't know why people are not engaged with the budget, which is quite a significant. It's probably the most important thing that council does, but you know, people may be busy. They may be doing other things and not focusing on what we're spending. We think that this is an important process, but maybe other people don't. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. I can't give you an answer to that. I don't think anyone can give you an answer for that particular question. So yeah, that's my answer.
Rose, I'd like to speak if I could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look, members, we've put in a lot of work in this budget cycle, and to be honest, it's been in my experience, this has been one of those budget processes where we've all, I think, contributed one way or another in the process. And also, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Sharon and her team because the way that this has been presented and vetting all the questions, you know, I understand the frustration that must be there when people are questioning the advice and to the level of scrutiny we do. But unfortunately, this is local government, and we do need to ask these questions moving forward. We also spent a bit of time trying to make some savings, and I agree. I think in some of the savings we've made, I think we're only delaying the inevitable to a degree in some of those savings. I take fleet management as an example. You know, we tried to last another year, but that's just putting off that cost. So I get the sentiment around using the money to reduce your deficit, no matter where we can save it while we're in a deficit position. I'm also, there's also that side of me that says we also need to manage and sell and message our community. I'm not necessarily in the position of saying, I reckon we need to cut rates down to a really low figure and really go to town on it to be that populist, because I understand the investment now is about what happens in the future and everything like that. But we would see this rate sitting as it sits right now, regardless of the meeting that we put in prior, where we said we want to move this below the line, this below the line, this below the line. This would be the rate increase. Yes, it's helped our longer term goals to maybe be realised a bit sooner. But I think there's a model here potentially where we can send a message by passing on a modest saving as well, that is a balancing act of the savings that we are using to be able to reduce our deficit, but then also trying to give back to the community in that short term. Now, I understand, again, that sounds like the populist thing, but there is also a message and a balance that we need to do as this elected body as well, when we're selling our core business and when we're selling what we want to achieve and how we're going to do it. So this particular report, I thank the staff again for putting it together. It's been a long slog, as every budget cycle and as every community consultation that comes through. I'm disappointed in the uptake. That's not to take away from the 5 members of the public that spent their time scrutinising and putting their views forward. And also the staff's response. I agree with Councillor Hughes in the professionalism that they showed through the responses. There was a couple of those responses that were a copy and paste because it is the same question, but then there was as answered to previous submission. So I'd just like that to be a bit more consistent next time. It's either as provided in a previous submission or it's a copy and paste, not a mix of both, but a minor feedback thing. But I think because it's a hard thing and because people might not be interested and all this, it's something we need to work on. Realistically, you know, we asked for submissions against 2 very wordy documents and we got 5 out of 26,000. You know, I think next time maybe we look at, well, what are the other opportunities? We've done it in the past where we've tried to provide a little bit of a survey prior and people have identified where they would like their money spent throughout the business. I thought that was a good methodology last time that helped inform the elected body. But as it sits right now, I'm still going to try to work through and whether or not I try to move something on notice because I wasn't comfortable trying anything without notice. But yeah, I'm happy to support this. And again, thanks staff for the time and put in, and also to the elected body for really taking the time to scrutinise the budget process this year. I look forward to doing it better again next year and going forward. So yeah, this recommendation has my support.
Any other discussion? You're seeking leave to speak again. Does Councillor Davies have leave? Yes, you have leave.
Yeah, so look, I'll be supporting this motion. There's one part I disagree with, but we can come back to that later. I think there's a couple of little projects of, you know, maybe $5,000 that have got support from the community that maybe we can move. But overall, I think this is something that, look, the rates discussion, I think, is valuable. That's not what we're deciding here, for the record. This is, receiving the submissions, and voting against it would just be voting to not receive the submissions, as functionally as, and,
Hello, Mr. Peter Fairley Jones. Would
hi.
you like to come and sit down?
and to make the decision on participatory
Sorry,
budgeting.
sorry,
but,
Brodie.
which I think perhaps should have been a separate motion. But yeah, this is something that we do need to, look to the long term with these decisions. We've cut a lot of spending in this budget. But of course, next year will come around and all of those cut items will still be there, waiting to be above the line. And the way that we would fund them is through rate rises. So, you know, a lot of these things that we're cutting are they're not cuts because we're not actually permanently cutting the item. We're just saying, let's push it back a year. But that is also saying, let's push back the increase of rates a year. And I think we need to acknowledge, you know, the level to which this is not an isolated budget. This is a budget that makes a decision on what we're going to do in the future and what we haven't done yet that we'll have to do in the future that, you know, we might have to have a bit more spending next time because we had a bit less spending this time, for example. And that's just, you know, how it works. There's no just, let's make some cuts and we've saved money for a lot of this stuff. So, you know, and it's complicated and that's why we're given an allowance to read 300-page documents and come back a few times a month to discuss it because it is complicated, but I think we've had a good process so far, so I'll support this.
Mr. Peter Fairley Jones is one of our independent members for the Audit and Risk Committee. Would you like to make a few comments? You've just sat down. Because we need to be here for 1 hour from 7 until 8 o'clock. Yeah, we do. So I'd like you to make some comments, Peter. You were the one that put up the 300,000 of savings. So maybe some comments around the overall budget process and also our long-term sustainability, financial sustainability.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess a general comment is having read the annual plan as it's being put out to consultation, as I thought it was an exceptionally good document, to be honest. I mean, certainly we've got a deficit proposed, but there's a plan to sort of move out of that over 2 years, which is good. I think it's not hanging around for multiple years. So I think that's good. And I think it seemed to me that the rate rise proposals, speaking, you know, not as a ratepayer, but actually a ratepayer in other area that's doing a much higher rate increase. But it is modest, not modest, but it's reasonable under the circumstances, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Any other discussion at this stage? I won't be closing the meeting until 8 o'clock, but we can actually deal with this matter. Do you want to say something, Sharon? Can you put your microphone on, please?
I was just saying I can actually answer Nick's question with regard to, so as at the end of April, there was, I'll just do from residential. So there was around about 1,200 residential properties on payment plans. So that's around about 11% of our total assessments.
But you don't, but the question was of the 419,000 on average, you haven't got that figure?
I wouldn't be in a position to sit there and say effectively, because obviously the average residential property value is just basically mathematical calculation.
Mm.
I can't, if you wanted to understand what brackets of property value
Yeah,
that those properties are, I'd have to get back to you, but
Yeah.
effectively around about 11% currently of our current assessments
Yeah.
have payment plans associated with that. The nature of those payment plans, because obviously as from a pensioner perspective, they can actually choose to postpone them as a postponement, which is also a payment plan as well. So so I can get back to you with the brackets, but from around about 11%.
It used to be 20.
Is on payment
used to be
plans, so,
20 4 or 5 years ago.
and we currently have around about probably around about 3% of our rate balance that is actually overdue. So which is very good from a council perspective as well. From that perspective. So it's that, and that's overall rates. That's just not the residential rate as well from the rate revenue
Thank
perspective.
you. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, Mayor, through you, my understanding is that a request to delay rates in that fashion is not mean tested. So going into a payment plan is, councils have been quite generous in allowing people to do
Yeah.
that to suit their particular, so it's not necessarily an indicator of demographic or stress. It could
Yeah.
be a personal choice. I'm sure there are a lot of people who choose that,
Yeah.
but I think we just need to be careful about using those statistics and interpreting them. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's across the board. I don't think it's just with people who have lower house prices. I think it's across the board, and it may well be a choice. So we'll hear from Sharon once you get further information. Thank you. Councillor Solomon.
I just want to double check and clarify, Mayor, just that I've read this correctly, that no capital works are being funded by an increase in rates. The only thing that's being funded to an increase in rates is that recurring operational budget. Is that correct?
Sharon.
So the only impact of the capital works program on this current budget would actually effectively be any increase in interest costs as a result of borrowings that's required to actually fund those.
Mm.
Effectively, what you actually have is that the impact on our operating position actually is a lag effect in the fact that obviously as you increase your asset base, your depreciation increases as well as a result, because you're amortizing that. Effectively, you're amortizing the capital cost of any of the capital improvements and upgrades and that are doing it. The only, I suppose, the exception of that is effectively it's not upgrades with respect to our renewal program. So we have a renewal program of around about 3.5 million, and effectively that's what depreciation is funding. So once you actually got the asset, so that is to renew those assets. So it is sort of, but effectively that's the whole idea of what depreciation is once you actually get an asset and to renew it, you actually renew it through that depreciation charge that you incorporate with regard to determination of your operating surplus.
I think that answers your question. Thank you. Any other? I'll go to Councillor Davies. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So just to, I guess to be clear, because everything is funded through our rates in a literal sense, in that rates are where all of our revenue comes from, or where 80–90% of our revenue comes from. But in terms of the accounting of it, we consider the core business of council as being rates paid, and then the rest is a debt situation.
We've also got grants.
We've got grants. We've got grants and we've got subsidiary charges, but the rates.
That's the lion's share.
Yeah. So you know, I guess clarifying and stalling for time for 10 minutes around the rates.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I'll state that you, that's the third time you've spoken now. Okay, yes. Councillor Solomon, you had a question?
I didn't have a question. It was just going to add, thank you. Thank you to Sharon and the whole team. And of course, I'm speaking to the motion, if that's all right. Thank you to Sharon and the whole team and of course the audit committee as well for this explanation. It's been good going through this for the first time and having that even having that separated out in the having the type of expenditure separated out in the initial paper budget we got was very helpful. So thank you to everyone, and I'll be supporting the motion like I think most other people here have said they'll do. I think we have made some very we've made some strides in reducing that that overdraft or that deficit, and I think it's a good base to progress from. And of course, just reinforce that the audit committee have done a fantastic job in looking at what we can and can't do and advising us as such.
Thank you. Any other discussion? You got a question, Deputy Mayor?
Just through you, Chair, page 40 of 84.
Hang on, let us get there first. 40, is it?
Of 84.
Just think I can- Yep, operating income, capital funding.
Yeah, I think that answers Councillor Davies' question. Just confirming through you, Chair, if I could. Rates are 67% of our operating income as documented. No. Sorry.
29,659,808. 67%.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's what I thought, Chair.
you want to clarify that? Is this wrong?
No, it's correct, but it's
Yeah.
not of our operating income. So effectively that takes into account our income and our funding. So just to further clarify, with respect to, I suppose, the important thing is to sit there and say that we need cash to actually either invest in our new capital improvements and new assets, and we need cash to actually deliver services. So fundamentally, and the two sources of that is basically the income that we generate through our operations, which is effectively about 41.3 million. And the other component of it is our borrowings that we actually use or any capital grant funding. So that on that page, that total tie is actually the total cash or the total income and funding that we actually receive together. And 67% of that total, which is around about $44 million, 67% of that is actually rates. So of our operating expenditure or operating income, our rate component is actually quite higher. It's probably around about 80% of our operating income. But it's 60% of our total cash that effectively comes in through our capital means and also our operating means as well. So that from capital would be capital grants that we receive for our assets and borrowings, and then any other sundry capital income plus our operating income. So
Thank you. I think that explains that page. Thank you very much. Yep, sure.
Thank you. And I think we've already received this, but if we ask for a pie chart that showed the residential rate income and the commercial rate income, that would be possible to circulate.
It's in here.
Oh, it is,
Which
yeah, I
page is
thought
it
I'd
in?
seen
Which
it before.
page? Can you just tell us which page? 65.
65.
Well, it's in
Yeah,
here.
sorry, my apologies. I knew
So
I had
there it
seen it.
is. 49,41496. Graph 2, rate revenue by land use. There it is.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay,
Yep, cheers.
awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for that question. Okay. I think we've exhausted pretty much all the questions, but thank you for everyone for asking those questions. We have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Hughes, do you want to wrap up the debate?
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone's thanked the staff for the report, which is great, and the questions, which is really good. And yeah, it's been good discussion tonight as well. I do think, you know, the operating deficit is something, you know, as councillors, we shouldn't be in that position unless you are sort of, you know, got major projects and things like that. And at the moment, you know, it's not a position we want to be in so trying to get out of that, you know, within that 2-year period is, or sooner, is, you know, something that we really need to strive to do, because I've seen Gawler Council, I think it was only 4 years rolling operating deficits, and yeah, very quickly it was $11 million, or, you know, that was in debt, and you know, I think we've nearly paid that all off.
We haven't quite paid it.
Well, we haven't quite, but yeah, I think we've got another year on that debt. So just, so, and we got no major projects out of that money. That was just to keep the lights on and all the really good work the council does, but there was no major projects out of that 11 million. So it was just to operate. So our capital projects are big things that our community wants and needs, and you know, we've got a lot of things that are getting very old, and we need, and we do have a long-term financial plan to deliver those. So it is really vitally important that we get debt under control. It allows us then to actually borrow a greater amount of money as well. So the more debt we've got, the less money we can actually borrow within our operating ratios and things like that as well. So as to be very mindful of that, and we do want to deliver major projects for our community, and I think that's something that in the last few years, Joe, this building, for example, Joe, we got our debt under control and we were able to borrow and build this fantastic facility, which is really important. So yeah, I'd ask councillors to support this. I do think it's important. I think a couple of councillors tonight flagged that there might be changes. I mean, we've gone out with a business plan. I think it's really important that, Joe, if you are, I mean, Joe, we are in a fairly tight financial position, so I am happy with the rate rise. I think, Joe, it's something that we, you know, if we were to drop that rate rise, Joe, that will affect our debt straight away, and our operating deficit will increase, and our debt will increase. And as I've said before, it's really easy to get into that rolling operating deficit. I don't think councils want to be in that position, but yeah, once you're in it, we should get out of it as soon as possible. But yeah, thanks everyone's hard work on this, and yeah, ask you to support the motion. Thanks.
The debate is closed. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, it is carried. Councillor Vallelonga has called a division. All those in favour, please stand up, please. Thank you. And I'll call your names out. All those in favour are Councillor Lorna, Councillor Kosh, Councillor Davies, Councillor Hughes, Deputy Mayor Shanks, Councillor Solomon, Councillor Hennessy. All those against are Councillor Vallelonga and Councillor Samble. The motion is carried. Thank you. So we've got one more minute. I'm not going to close the meeting just yet because we must be here for 1 hour. And somebody might walk in and want to do a deputation, and that's perfectly okay, or speak to council. So it is now 8 o'clock, and I think we started at 7:01. So we've got 1 more minute. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it 60 minutes. It's under the Act. Under the Act. No.
So as part of the public consultation process requirements for the annual business plan, so we have to actually provide an opportunity for the public to address the council in verbal submissions.
Yeah.
We can either do it by a separate meeting for at least a minimum of 1 hour, or we can do it as a meeting of council, but it has to, we still have to provide that 1 hour opportunity for people to actually address the council. So it's been in the act for a long, long time.
It's 8:01. So thank you everyone for coming. Let's have a look. I close the meeting at 8:01. Thank you.